Hello everybody and welcome to my 17th video. This is on binary implemented ternary logic circuits. I'll be going through the 6 binary operators in my 14th video, a ternary algebra with 6 binary operators. For this video you'll need to refer to my 5th video, binary implemented ternary logic circuits, to understand what I'm going to explain. Right, so we'll start off with the zero function, A0, B. Here we have the listing the binary inputs A and B for 2 variables and the output A0, B. The zero function is the minimum of function, and we have binary variables A1 and A2, B1 and B2, therefore the inputs A and B respectively. And we have the outputs A0, B2 and A0, B1, which are the binary outputs for A0, B. So here I'm using output resistor network A, which is shown in my 5th video, binary implemented ternary logic circuits. So if F2 is a 1, that is a 2, F will be a 1. That's 2, sorry, there. And if F1 and F2 is both zeros, that will be a 0, so that's there. And if F1 is a 1 and F2 is a 0, that will be a ternary logic 1, which is shown here. Right, so we'll move on to the Carnot maps. I should explain A1 is a 1 if A is greater or equal to 1, i.e. 1 or 2, and A2 is a 1 if A is equal to 2, and same for B. But the output uses various codings, so I'll explain it as I go. So we'll move on to the Carnot maps. Here are the Carnot maps for A0B, or the minimum function. This is Carnot map A0B2, this is Carnot map A0B1. So here, A2 equals a 1 and A1 equals a 0 is a can't happen state. And here, B2 equals a 1 and B1 equals 0 is a can't happen state. So they can't happen, their X is denoted with an X. And the entries in the truth table are listed here. These are a square of 9 entries. So here we're looping the 1s and treating these X's as 1s. So this loop is equal to A2 and B2. So A0, B2 equals A2 and B2. I'm using De Morgan's theorem to change the AND to a NOR. So that's not A2, NOR not B2. Here for A0, B1, again we have the can't happen states here for A and B, and we're looping this group of 1s here, and that is A1 and B1. So A0, B1 is A1 and B1. I'm going to use De Morgan's theorem to change that into a NOR function, so that's not A1, NOR not B1. So here we have F2 here, F1 here, and A0, B here. These are the binary inputs, this is the ternary outputs. Here we have the zero function circuit diagram. Just see it. Here's the output here, A0, B. Inputs here, A and B. This transistor diode resistor network here converts A into the binary inputs A1 and A2. Similar here for B, B1 and B2. And this function here is not A1 and NOR not B1. And this function here is not A2, NOR not B2. And these are 240 ohm resistors, which drives the ternary outputs. Okay. Here we have the 1 function. Again, 2 inputs A and B, ternary inputs. A1B here, the ternary outputs. Again, A1, A2, B1 and B2, as before for A and B. I'm using diode resistor network C, which you'll find in my video at binary implemented ternary logic circuits. So this is what we're using for coding the output A1, B2 and A1, B1. So here, if F1 is a 0, this F2 can be a 0 and 1, which is here. So this can be a 0 or 1, which is noted by an X, which is a don't care state. Alright. Here we have the counter maps for A0, B1. This is A0, B1, 2, and A1, B1. So here we're looping the zeros here. This loop here is not A1 or A2, and this loop here is not B1 or B2. So A1, B2 equals not A1 or B2 and not B1 or B2. Now here I'm using De Morgan's theorem to change that into a NAND. So that's A1 NAND not A2 and B1 NAND not B2. For A1 B1, this counter map, here I'm looping this group of ones here, which is A1, and this group of ones here, which is B2. So that's A1 or B1. And again I'm using De Morgan's theorem to change the OR into a NAND. So that's not A1 NAND not B1. Right, so this AND function here I'm going to implement using these two diodes. So this is this function here and this is this function here. And with this output set of 1, binary logic 1, this acts as a pull-up resistor. So this node here will be a 0 when either A1, this input or this input is a 0, which defines the AND function. This node will only be a logic 1 if this input and this input is a logic 1. So similarly for a 3-input circuit, for a 3-variable input circuit, you could add another diode here and have C1 NAND not C2. And this would be not A1 and NAND not B1 NAND C1. Okay. Here's a one-function circuit diagram. Here we have, as before, the transistor diode resistor networks, which converts A into A1 and A2 and B into B1 and B2. So here we have not A1 and not, or no NAND, not B2, and here we have B1 NAND not A2, and here we have the diodes to simulate the AND function. These are 240 ohm resistors. Right. Next we go to the to function. Here we have inputs A and B, and A2B the output, ternary inputs, ternary outputs. Here are the binary variables, A1 and A2 as before, B1 and B2 as before for inputs A and B. And I'm using diode resistor network, output network B, for the coding of A2B2 and A2B1. So when F2 is a 1, F1 can be a 0 or a 1. So this is A0, B2 being a 1. And A2, B1 being a 0 and 1, which is noted by an X here and here. Okay. So I should mention that these, again, this diode resistor network is in my video called Binary Implemented Ternary Logic Circuits, which you'll need to look up. So here I have the counter maps for A2B2 and A2B1. Here we're looping the zeros, A2 and A2 or B2. So these are don't care or can't happen states here, and this is the 9 entries in the Canmap truth table. So A2 or B2 for A2 B2, and I'm going to use a double negation to implement the OR function with NOR functions. So here we have A2B1. Again, can't happen states here. 9 entries in the Canmap, and I'm looping these group of ones here and treating these x's as ones. So that's A1 and B1. And so A2B1 is A1 and B1. I'm going to use De Morgan's theorem to change this AND into a NOR. So that's not A1, NOR, not B1. So here we have F2 here on the diode resistor output network, and here we have F1. This is A2B, this is F. So we'll go to the circuit diagram. Here we have, again, transistor diode resistor networks going to convert A and B into A1, A2, B1 and B2. And I'm using a NOR function wired as an inverter to make this an OR function, and this would be a NOR function by itself. Here is the Schottky diode, B.I.T.L.O.N, and here I'm using 240 ohm resistors here for the output A2B. Here we have output A1. This is not A1, sorry. This is output A2. This is not B1, this is B2. And here we have A2 or B2. And this is not A1, no, not B1. Right. Next we have the zero squared function, sorry. Here again we have inputs A and B, and the output is 0 squared B. A1, A2, B1, B2 as before. And I'm using output diode resistor network C to implement the output coding for A0B, A0 squared B2 and A0 squared B1. So here, if F1 is a 0, F2 can be a 0 or a 1, and that is an X, don't care state. So this is here, A0 B1 is a 0, A0 squared B2 is an X. Right. So we'll move to the Canmaps. Here we have A0 squared B2 and A0 squared B1. We have the can't happen states again, and the 9 entries in the truth table. So here I'm looping the zeros and treating these X as zeros. So that's A2 or B2. So A0 squared B2 equals A2 or B2. I'm going to convert the OR to a NAND using De Morgan's theorem, and that's not A2, NAND, not B2. So for A0 squared B1, again you have the don't care, can't happen states here, and I'm looping the ones here, so that's A1 and B1. I'm going to use a double negation here to implement this AND function. So A0 squared B1 is A1 and B1, which is a double negation on the output. So this is F2, A0 B squared, this is F1, and this is the output here. Right. So here I have the zero squared function circuit diagram. Same thing as before, the diode resistor networks here, transistor networks for A and B. And I'm using this NAND function widened as inverter to make this whole function an AND function. And this here is a NAND function. Using 74ACT00 for this, BAT43 diode, Schottky diode, and 240 ohm resistors for the output network. So this is the output here, is 0 squared b. Here we have B1, sorry, A1, not, yeah, A1, not A2, B1, not B2. So this function is not A2 and not B2, and this is A1 and B1 here. Here we have the 1 squared function. Again, our inputs A and B, ternary inputs A and B, A1 squared B output. Ternary output here, A1 and A2, B1 and B2 as before for A and B. I'm using diode resistor output networks B for these coding of these functions A1 squared B2 and A1 squared B1. So here again, if F2 is a 1, F1 can either be a 0 or a 1, so this is denoted here by an X. So here we have the counter maps for A1 squared B2. This is A1 squared B2, this is the counter map for that, and this is A1 squared B1. So here we have the counter album states here, 9 entries in the truth table, and we're looping the 1s here and treating these x's as 1s. So that's A2 and B2. So A1 squared B2 equals A2 and B2. And we're using De Morgan's theorem to change his and into a no. That's not A2 and not B2. For A1 squared B1, I'm looping these 1s here. So this is A1 and not A2. This is B1 and not B2. So A1 squared B1 equals A1 and not A2, or B1 and not B2. So I'm going to use De Morgan's theorem to turn these ands into no's. So that's not A1, no, not A2, or not B1, no, B2. Now again, I'm going to implement this OR function using these two diodes here. So these are the functions with this input at a 0, F2 at a 0, this input here. This node here will be a 1 if this input here is a 1 or that the input there is a 1. So that's the definition of the OR function. So I'm just using these to implement that. Again, if you wanted a three input function, you would add another diode and another diode connected to that node there, and have not C1, no, not C2. This would be a 3-input function, not A2, no, not B2, no, not C2. So let's go to the circuit diagram. Right, this is a 1 squared function circuit diagram. Again, transistor diode resistor networks here to convert A and B equal to A1, A2, B1 and B2. These are the diodes I'm using to create the NOR function, or the OR function. And here we have not A1, no A2. This is not B1, not B2. And this is not A2, no, not B2. Again, 240 ohm resistors for the output. And this is the output A1 squared B. These are NOR functions, which is AC, 74ACTO2, and Schmidt triggers 74ACT14. Here we have the 2 squared function, which is the maximal function, and the 0 function being the minimal function, as I've mentioned, I think. So here we have A2 squared B, these are inputs A and B. This is A2 squared B, which is the maximum function. takes the maximum value of what's ever on its inputs. A1, A2, B1 and B2 as before, and we're using resistor output network A to use the coding for A2 squared B2 and A2 squared B1. Right, so we'll go to the counter maps. This is A2 squared B2 here, and this is A2 squared B1 here. So here, for A2 squared B2, looping the zeros here, so that's A2 or B2. These are can't happen states again. These are the 9 entries of the truth table. So A2 squared B2 is A2 or B2. Again, I'm going to use De Morgan's theorem to change that OR into a NAND. So that's not A2 NAND, not B2. For A2 squared B1, we have these counter maps here, these loops here, 2 loops. This is A1 here, this is B1 here. We're looping the 1s, so that's A1 or B1 for A2 squared B1. I'm going to use De Morgan's theorem to change this OR into a NAND. So that's not A1, NAND, not B1. So this is the output resistor network. This is A2, this is F2, this is F1, and this is the output F. So we'll go to the circuit diagram. Here we have the transistor diode resistor networks here to convert A and B into A1, A2, B1 and B2. These are the NAND functions, 74SETOO, 240 ohm resistors. This is the output. So here we have not A2 and not A1 and not B1 here. Not A1 NAND, not B1. And this is not A2 NAND, not B2 here. Right. So now I'm going to go through an algebraic method of deriving the equations for the circuits, i.e. for this circuit equations, the minimal function A0B, A0B2 and A0B1. And the reason I'm doing this is to save drawing 6 or 8 variables or how many variable counter maps. You can do it by algebra, which is an easier method. So we have A0B2 here, which is A2 and B2. A0B1 is A1 and B1. So for a 3-input function, A0B0C2, I'm going to split this A0B here into group it A0B there, and have C there standing by itself. This is the associative law, which I can do, and you're treating this as a 2-variable function now, with that A0B lumped together. So this is, so you're replacing A0B with A and C with B for the 2 functions. So that's A0B2 here and C2, A and B, A and B, and A0B2 equals A2 and B2, so that A0B0C2, A2 equals A2 and B2 and C2. Similar thing for A0B0C1, you can split it into A0B0C, with that treated as 1 variable and that as another. So you're making it a 2-variable function. So A0B1 equals A1 and B1. So this becomes A0B1 and this becomes C1. So you've got A0B1 and C1. Now A0B1 equals A1 and B1. So you substitute that in, A1 and B1, and you get A0B0C1 equals A1 and B1 and C1. And you can use this technique to expand for any number of variables you like. So here we have A1B. So So A1, B2 equals not A1 or A2 and not B1 or B2. And A1, B1 equals A1 or B1. Now I'm going to use the relationship not A1, B1 or A1, B2 equals A1, B2. Now you can prove this by truth table, which I've done. Well, I've tried it, yeah, it works, but you can prove it algebraically, but I'm not going to prove it algebraically here. I'm just going to state it and say that you can prove it by truth table. So, again, A1, B1, C2 equals A1B in brackets 1C. So, I'm treating this as one variable and this as one variable. So, here we have A1B2 equals A is A1B, A1 or A2 and B1 or B2. So that becomes, this group here becomes not A1, B1, which is that variable, substituting for that, A1, B2, which is that variable, and C1 and not C2, which is this variable. So this reduces to A1, B2. And A1, B2 equals that, which is there. So you get A1, B1, C2 equals not A1 or A2, and not B1 or B2, and not C1 or C2. For A1, B1, C1, you can split that again, group it into, loop that as one variable and have that as another. So it's a two variable function. So A1, B1, C, this function goes to A1, B1, which is there, and you OR it with C1. So this becomes A1B and B becomes C. And then in turn A1, B1 equals A1 or B1. So you substitute that in there and you get A1, B1, C1 equals A1 or B1 or C1. So here we have the two function A2B. So A2B2 equals A2 or B2, A2B1 equals A1 and B1. So again, A2B2C2 equals A2B brackets 2C2. So you're just grouping this variable here and treating it as a two variable function. So A2B2C2 equals A2B2 here. So you're treating that as A2 and this as B2. So if that makes sense. So that becomes A2B2 and that becomes C2. And A2B2 becomes A2 or B2. And you substitute that in. So A2B to C2 equals A2 or B2 or C2. Similar thing for A2B1 to A2B to C1. You lump that together to make A2B brackets 2C1. So this become A2B1 equals A1 and B1. So you're treating this as A and this as B. So that becomes A2B1 and C1, and A2B1 equals A1 and B1. So that becomes A2B to C1 equals A1 and B1 and C1. Right, here we have the A0 squared B, the 0 squared function A0 squared B. So A0 squared B is A2 or B2, and A0 squared B1 is A1 or B1, A1 and B1. So again, A0 squared B, 0 squared B, C2, you're using the associative law, you lump that together and treat it as one variable, have that as C. So, A0 B2 equals A2 or B2. So this is A, which is A0 B2. This becomes C becomes B, which is C2. And then A0 squared B2 is A2 or B2. So you substitute that in. You get A0 squared B, 0 squared C2 A2 or B2 or C2. Again, for A0, B0 squared, B0 squared, B0 squared, C1, you lump it, use the associative law to lump this as one variable and this as two. So you're treating it as a two variable function. A0 squared B1 is A1 and B1. So that becomes A0 squared B1 and C1. So you're treating this as A and this as B, if you like, in here. And A0 squared B1 is A1 and B1, and you substitute that in. You've got A0 squared B0 squared C1 equals A1 and B1 and C1. Here we have the 1 squared function A1B. A1 squared B2 is A2 and B2. A1 squared B1 is A1 and not A2, or B1 and not B2. So I'm going to use the relationship A1 squared B1 and A1 squared B2 not equals A1 squared B1. Again, you can prove it by truth table, which is what I've done, and you can prove it algebraically. But I'm not going to go into the algebraic proof. I'm just going to state it here and say you can prove it by truth table. So A1 squared B1 squared B2 here. You're lumping this together and treating it as a two variable function. So this becomes A2 and this becomes C2 here, the AND function A2 and B2. And A1 base 1 squared B2. A2 and B2, so you substitute that in there, and you get A1 squared B1 squared C2 equals A2 and B2 and C2. For A1 squared B1 squared B1, again using the associative law, treat it as a two variable function, and so this becomes A1 squared B1 A1 squared B1 and not A1 squared B2, which is here, and this becomes C1 and not C2, which will be there. So this equals A1 squared B1, so that becomes A1 squared B11, or A1 and not C2, C1 and not C2. A1 squared B1 equals that, substitute it in, and you get A1 squared B1 squared 1 squared C1 equals A1 and not A2, or B1 and not B2, or C1 and not C2. So lastly we have the maximal function. So again, A2 squared B2 is A2 or B2. A2 squared B1 is A1 or B1. So for A2 squared B2 squared C2, you bracket it off using the associative law. Treat that as a two variable function here. Lump that together and treat this as a two variable function. So A2 squared B2 is A2 or B2. So that becomes A2 squared B2 or C2. There. And this A2 squared B2 equals A2 or B2, so you substitute that in. You get A2 squared B2 squared C2 is A2 or B2 or C2. Here for A2 squared B2 squared C1, you again split it up and treat this as a two variable function. So A0B1 is A1, A2 squared B1 is A1 or B1. So this becomes A2 squared B1, this becomes C1, treating this as A and this as C as B, if that makes sense. And A2 squared B1 equals A1 or B1, so you substitute that in, and you get A2 squared B2 squared C1 equals A1 or B1 or C1. So you can do this repeat the process for more variables. You can do a similar process for 4 variables by treating A2 squared B and then having C2 squared D as treating a 4 variable function as a 2 variable function and applying this as well. So good luck with that. Right, I think that concludes the video. Just like to say I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Bye.